people in California. We want to have no crime. I know Gavin was here. I used to get along so great with Gavin when I was president. Gavin's a good guy. And we're going to, if he needed it, I would do it in a heartbeat. I'd love to see, we did help them a lot in Los Angeles, a lot with the early in my term when they had some problems. But we would love to do it. I will say this, if I were a Democrat governor or whatever, I would call up Trump. I'd say, come on in, make us look good. Because we're cutting crime down to nothing. And we're taking people out, career criminals, who are only going to do bad things, and we're bringing them back to their countries. But where we've done it has been amazing. And we have a capacity to do it at much greater levels. We're cutting illegal aliens off welfare and other government benefits, and I have directed that starting immediately, there will be no more payments to sanctuary cities because they are really just sanctuaries for criminals. They're really protecting criminals, and those are the ones we have to get out of the country: murderers, drug dealers.
Donald Trump is doubling down on stupid. California has been a leader in climate policy going back to Ronald Reagan. 1967, Governor Ronald Reagan established the first tailpipe emissions in the United States of America, created the California Air Resources Board. 3 years later, a president by the name of Richard Nixon, another Republican, codified California's leadership under the Clean Air Act. Never in the history of the United States of America has there been a more destructive president than the current occupant in the White House in Washington, D.C. He's trying to recreate the 19th century. He's a wholly owned subsidiary of big oil, gas, and coal. He's quite literally reopening coal plants in the United States of America. He's received close to $500 million in campaign contributions. He asked for $1 billion, look it up, in return for basically eliminating all regulations in the United States of America. De facto, he just did that yesterday with federal regulations and the endangerment finding. It is code red in terms of American leadership in this space. Low carbon, green growth. And I know a thing or two about this. I represent the 4th largest economy from a GDP perspective in the world. And we ran the 4th largest economy last year, 9 out of 10 days on 100% clean energy. 2/3 renewable energy. We've seen our GDP grow by 81% since 2000, and we've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 21%. 7 times more clean energy jobs than fossil fuel jobs. We're proving at scale that we can implement, we can compete, and we can dominate. But Donald Trump is trying to turn back the clock. And so we're showing up, but we're also showing what can be accomplished, the power of emulation. We are in the great implementation in my state. Final word. I hope, if there's nothing else I can communicate today, Donald Trump is temporary. He'll be gone in 3 years. California is a stable and reliable partner in this space. And it's important for folks to understand the temporary nature of this current administration in relationship to the issue of climate change and climate policy. You just got to call this stuff out. Look, the polluted heart of the climate crisis is big oil, period, full stop. That's what this is all about. I mean, that's where the politics, that's where the timidity comes from. You talk about the tech stack. You can't get in one of these modern new vehicles and ever want to go back to the old gas guzzler. I mean, the technology, and we can talk in terms of just energy efficiency and how we bring down costs, and we've got to address those cost issues. But the biggest problem is the deceit and the denial that's happening because of these special interests. And so you just have to have the courage to call it out. And I agree with you. It's infuriating what I hear privately, but is not expressed publicly. And so we have to call people out. They'll be held to account. They will be judged and ultimately judge themselves. And I think this is a moral moment across the board, simultaneous crisis, not just climate, but democracy, all this stacking of stress. And we all have a relationship to it. Society becomes how we behave. We are our behaviors. And so all of us have a role to play. All of us have agency. We can shape this conversation, but we have to stand up with more clarity, conviction, and we have to be more consistent.
People don't speak up because they're afraid of retaliation.
Yeah. Well, Buck up. So am I. There's probably not a politician in the United States. I'm under assault attack by this guy every single day. Here's the President of the United States. He's 80 years old, and he's calling me a nickname that an 8-year-old called me, Newsom. The President of the United States. You saw the racist tropes he put out. This is the President of the United States of America. Call this guy out. Stop this timidity. Stop with the BS diplomacy. You're in the rearview mirror. The recklessness of our own actions. And we're all becoming Chamberlains in this space. We have a supine United States Congress, so we have to stand up. Corporate leaders have to stand up. People have to stand up.
The smile was the first thing you noticed, and it was the very thing that would undo him. Gavin Newsom sat in the Oval Office, the golden light of a D.C. afternoon filtering through the tall windows, flanked by 30 reporters with their lenses trained on his face like high-caliber rifles. To his right sat the President of the United States. Newsom was smiling that particular brand of defensive smile, the kind a man wears when he believes that if he only looks relaxed enough, the world will magically become as serene as his expression. It was a mask of confidence that didn't quite reach the corners of his eyes. There is a specific kind of light in the Oval Office during the late hours of a Washington winter, a heavy, honey-colored glow that feels thick with the weight of history. It is a room designed to make powerful men feel small. And on this particular Tuesday, Gavin Newsom was feeling the gravity of the architecture. He sat in the visitor's chair, his posture a study in calculated grace, his hands resting lightly on the armrests, as if he were merely pausing between movements in a symphony. He was the governor of California, the face of the Golden State, and he had come to the Capitol to project the image of a successor in waiting. Donald Trump looked at the smile, then at the cameras, and then back at the smile with the practiced timing of a veteran headliner. "Look at him," Trump said, his voice carrying that familiar mocking lilt. "He's smiling. He shouldn't be smiling. Wait till you hear the numbers." The preparation for this moment had begun long before the first camera shutter clicked. 30 minutes earlier, that Newsom had crossed the threshold of the West Wing, his stride purposeful, his greeting polished. He had shaken hands with 3 staffers, calling them by name. He'd done his homework. He knew the names of their children, the colleges they had attended, the specific policy papers they had authored. He was a man of detail, a man of preparation, but the battlefield had been prepped long before his motorcade cleared the gates. At 6:47 a.m., Trump had already fired the first shot on Truth Social. Governor Gavin Newsom of California has agreed to come to the Oval Office today for a discussion about the future of California. Should be very interesting. Maybe he can explain where the money went. By the time Newsom's tires crunched on the White House gravel, that post had been viewed 14 million times. It was an opening salvo that set the tone for the entire encounter. Newsom's inner circle had spent 48 hours agonizing over this invitation. Half of them saw a neon sign blinking "Trap," a siren song designed to lure the governor into a den of theatrical cruelty. The other half argued that a refusal would smell like fear, a governor hiding from the commander-in-chief, a leader unwilling to defend his record in the highest room in the land. Newsom, a veteran of Fox News debates who prided himself on his ability to walk into a lion's den and come out with his suit unwrinkled, sided with the latter. He would go. He would be the adult in the room. He would let Trump be Trump while he remained presidential. He arrived in a dark suit that likely cost more than a month's rent in Fresno. A garment of such fine weave it seemed to repel the very air around it. His hair was a marvel of architectural stability, held in place by products that defied the laws of physics and the humidity of the Potomac. His handshake was a masterpiece of political stagecraft. Firm, exactly 2 seconds, direct eye contact, and a micro smile that signaled, I am your equal. But when he gripped Trump's hand, the president executed the subtle choreography of power he'd spent decades perfecting. He held the grip a half-second too long. He gave a slight gravitational pull that brought Newsom off balance, just enough to be felt, but not enough to be seen. He tilted his own frame to dominate the camera angle, a silent assertion of territorial dominance. Then they sat. Trump was anchored behind the massive carved oak of the resolute desk, I a piece of furniture that functioned as both a workspace and a fortress. Newsom was relegated to the visitor's chair, the lower chair, the supplicant's chair, the seat occupied by foreign dignitaries and cabinet secretaries who are there to listen, not to lead. In the Oval Office, geometry is destiny. The height of the seat, the angle of the light, the distance from the desk, it all whispered a single truth. One man was the host, and the other was a guest who could be asked to leave at any moment. "Thank you all for being here," Trump began, his palms flat on the desk. "This is a very important meeting. Governor Newsom has come all the way from California to talk about the future of his great state. Beautiful state. Used to be, anyway." He shot a sideways glance at Newsom, a look that combined pity with a sharp, predatory curiosity. "We're going to have a very honest conversation. Very honest. I have some numbers. He's not going to like the numbers, but the numbers are the numbers. You can't argue with the numbers." Trump leaned back, the grin widening. It wasn't a smile of warmth. It was the grin of a man who knew he had the better hand and was enjoying the slow reveal. "Gavin, how's California doing? Tell everybody. Tell the folks back home." Newsom leaned forward, trying to reclaim the space, his voice dropping into that smooth, practiced baritone that had served him so well on the campaign trail. "Well, Mr. President, I appreciate the invitation, and I'm happy to share that California remains the 5th largest economy in the world." "He's doing it," Trump interrupted, he pointing a finger at the press pool with the glee of a child who had just predicted the ending of a movie. "I told my people this morning, I said, he's going to say 5th largest economy in the first 30 seconds. I bet a Diet Coke on it. Somebody owes me a Diet Coke." He turned back to Newsom, the humor sharpening into a blade. "Gavin, you can't keep saying that. You've said it 1,000 times. Nobody's impressed anymore. You know what else is big? Russia's economy is big. Brazil's economy is big. Doesn't mean you'd want to live there. Being big isn't the same as being good. You're confusing size with success." The room rippled with the laughter of the press pool, that nervous, reflexive laughter that happens when a powerful man makes a joke at someone else's expense. Newsom's smile stayed fixed, a permanent fixture of his facial architecture, but the skin around his eyes went tight. He was realizing, perhaps for the first time, that he wasn't in a debate. He was in a demolition. Trump didn't give him a second to breathe. He reached for a thin red folder adorned with a gold presidential seal, a visual prop carefully selected for the cameras, a physical manifestation of authority. "Let me tell the room a story," Trump said, his voice dropping into the rhythmic cadence of a fireside chat. "November 2020. Gavin here, beautiful Gavin, great hair, tells 40 million people in California, stay home. Don't go out. Don't see your family. Don't go to Thanksgiving. If your mother is dying in the hospital, you can't visit. If your father's funeral is this weekend, you can't go. Restaurants closed. Barber shops closed. Churches, the schools, all closed. Your kids are sitting at home staring at a laptop, trying to learn math from a screen. Millions of people following the rules because they were told it was the right thing to do." He opened the folder and extracted a photograph, holding it up like a piece of evidence in a capital murder trial. It was the image that had become the shorthand for Newsom's political vulnerability. The French Laundry. The photo showed the governor at a table of 12, packed indoors, the sliding glass doors shut tight against the night air. There were no masks, no social distancing, only the soft glow of luxury and the proximity of power. November 6th, 2020, Trump intoned, his voice echoing in the quiet of the room. The same month he's telling everyone to hide. Where is Gavin? He's at the French Laundry. You know the French Laundry? $350 a plate. That's before the wine, and Gavin knows wine. He's got a winery the Gettys bought for him, but we'll get to that. Look at this photo. No masks. They lied and said it was outdoors. The doors are closed. He's sitting shoulder to shoulder with lobbyists from the California Medical Association. The very people telling the public how to handle COVID are breaking the rules at his dinner party. It's a beautiful dinner, I'm sure. The best food. But while Gavin is eating truffles, the people of California are eating their own savings. He set the photo on the desk, facing the cameras, a silent witness that would remain there for the duration of the meeting. It was a piece of visual rhetoric that Newsom couldn't escape. And his kids, Trump continued, his voice dropping to a tone of mock disbelief. This is the part that really gets me. His kids were in private school, in person, teachers in the room, friends in the room, the whole deal. Meanwhile, the children of California were on Zoom, falling behind, getting depressed, suffering from anxiety like doctors have never seen. Their development was stunted, their futures were dimmed. But Gavin's kids? They're fine. Private school. $12,000 a year. Very nice. It must be nice to have two sets of rules. One for the people with the hair gel, and another for the people who pay for it. Mr. President, Newsom interjected, his voice cool and measured, trying to steer the conversation back to the shore of civility. I've acknowledged publicly that the French Laundry dinner was a mistake, and A mistake? Trump threw his hands up, his voice rising to meet the rafters. He calls it a mistake. You know what Rosa Martinez calls it? She calls it the end. Rosa had a restaurant in Fresno. Mexican food. Great food. She ran it for 22 years. She followed your rules, Gavin. She closed when you told her to close. She wore the mask when you told her to wear the mask. And she lost everything. 22 years of work, of sweat, of family legacy, gone because she followed the rules that you broke. She calls it the end. You call it a mistake. Rosa couldn't afford a $350 plate. She couldn't even afford to keep the lights on after you were done with her. He leaned in closer, invading Newsom's personal space, his eyes narrow and focused. And then, this is unbelievable, but it happened, then you went to a closed hair salon for a blowout, during a pandemic. Salons are closed by your own order, and you walk in to get your hair done. And when you get caught on camera, because there's always a camera, Gavin, you should know that by now, you say you were set up, and you say the salon owner owes you an apology. Erica, the owner, nice lady. She got death threats. She had to close her business. She had to leave San Francisco. She lost her home. Gavin got a blowout and a fresh start. That's California for you. The elite get a haircut, and the workers get a pink slip. So, Gavin, tell us, how's California doing? Newsom opened his mouth to respond, his brain likely firing through a dozen rehearsed rebuttals, but Trump was already a mile down the next road, moving with the momentum of a landslide. Let's talk about Gavin's background, because it's a fairy tale, really. It's the kind of story they tell in San Francisco to make themselves feel better. His daddy, William Newsom, was a lawyer for Getty Oil. best friends with Gordon Getty, billionaire, one of the richest families in history. Getty looked at little Gavin and said, "I'm going to invest in that boy." He put money into 10 out of 11 of Gavin's businesses. 10 out of 11. He told the San Francisco Chronicle he treated Gavin like a son. So, this guy? He didn't build anything. He didn't struggle. A billionaire wrote checks, and Gavin cashed them. And he calls himself a man of the people. He calls himself a champion of the middle class. Trump pointed to his own chest, a gesture of stark contrast. "I took a loan from my father. Everyone knows it. I've talked about it 1,000,000 times. And I built an empire. Buildings with my name on them. Hotels, golf courses, tens of thousands of employees. I built things you can touch, things that changed the skyline." Gavin took a billionaire's checkbook and opened a winery in Napa. Very nice, I'm sure. But Getty built it. Gavin just stood in front of it and smiled. That's his main skill, really. Standing in front of things and smiling. He's a professional frontman for other people's money. The president leaned back, eyes narrowing, as he moved into the political origins of his guest. And then, how does he get into politics? Willie Brown, the godfather of San Francisco. Willie just appointed him. No vote, no election, no campaign. Willie said, "Sit here, kid," and put him on the Parking and Traffic Commission, then the Board of Supervisors. Then he runs for mayor. See, and then, this is the part that really makes the story, he has an affair with his campaign manager's wife. The guy out there knocking on doors, shaking hands, working the strategy, and Gavin is at home with the man's wife. In any other city in America, that's the end. Career over. Disgraced. But in San Francisco, they promoted him. Mayor to lieutenant governor to governor. It's a culture of corruption covered in a layer of expensive hair product. Trump looked at the ceiling as if searching for the logic in the stars, his face a mask of performative confusion. "Gavin, the hair gel. I have to ask, was that before or after the affair?" "Because it's great hair. Maybe the second best in politics." He touched his own golden mane, a self-aware nod to the absurdity of the moment. But here's the thing. Hair doesn't run a state. Numbers run a state. So policy runs a state. And your numbers are a disaster. Your numbers are a cry for help. "Mr. President," Newsom said, his tone sharpening, the frustration finally beginning to leak through the polished exterior, "personal attacks aren't productive. I came here to discuss policy. I came here to discuss the partnership between the federal government and the state of California." "Policy! I love policy!" Trump shouted, his voice booming. "Let's talk policy. Let's talk about the results of your policy." He pulled another sheet from the red folder, this one covered in highlighted figures and annotated notes. "I have numbers, real numbers, census numbers, your own state's numbers. 4 million people have left California since the year 2000. 4 million. Think about that number. That is more than the population of 22 individual states. That's like the entire city of Los Angeles waking up one morning, packing a truck, and driving to Texas. And you know what? A lot of them did go to Texas. Texas, Florida, Arizona, Tennessee. Red states, every one of them. They went to places that do the opposite of what Gavin does. Lower taxes, less regulation, more freedom, cheaper housing. You know, the things people actually want. He read from the sheet with clinical precision, his voice becoming a steady drumbeat of decline. 817,000 left in 2022 alone. And it's not just anyone. It's not just the retirees. It's doctors, engineers, teachers, entrepreneurs. The smart people are leaving, Gavin. The productive people are leaving. They're fleeing to the states your party calls backward. What does that tell you? It tells me that your model is a failure. It tells me that people are escaping your vision of the future. Trump's voice rose in volume and intensity. And the businesses. Tesla, gone. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, the man who was supposed to be the future of California, said, "I can't do business here anymore," and moved to Texas. Oracle, gone to Texas. Hewlett-Packard, the company that started in a garage in Palo Alto, gone to Texas. Charles Schwab, Palantir, gone. These aren't lemonade stands, Gavin. These are the companies that built Silicon Valley. They created that fifth largest economy you love to talk about. They built the tax base that pays for your staff. They built it, and you drove them out. You taxed them, you regulated them, and you insulted them until they finally had enough. He slapped the paper back onto the desk, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Let's talk cost of living. It costs $26,000 more per year for a middle-class family to live in California than the national average. If you make $100,000 in California, you have the buying power of $73,000 in a normal state. You lose 27% of your income just by standing on the soil. Gas prices, highest in the country. And what did Gavin do? He created a price gouging penalty that his own economists warned would raise prices. And it did. Because when you add costs to a business, Gavin, the business passes them to the customer. This is day one business stuff. This is lemonade stand economics. You're punishing the people for the problems you created. Newsom attempted to speak, his mouth forming the words of a defense based on venture capital investment and technological hubs, but the tidal wave of data continued to crash over him. Housing. The median home in California is $874,000. $874,000. In Ohio, where J.D. Vance is from, great guy, very smart, you can buy a beautiful house for $200,000. In Texas, $300,000. In California, $900,000 for a shack. Gavin wonders why people are leaving. They're not leaving because of the weather. California has great weather. It's the best weather in the world. They're leaving because they can't afford the weather. Electricity? 32 cents per kilowatt hour, double the national average. And it went up 11% last year. You are paying double for power in a state that is always sunny. How do you manage that? It takes a special kind of talent, an expensive talent. You've turned the sun into a luxury item. Trump turned his gaze back to the journalists, inviting them into his narrative. 4 million people. Think about that. 4 million individual decisions made at kitchen tables. 4 million times a person looked at their rent, their paycheck, their grocery bill and said, "I'm done. I can't do this anymore." Nobody forced them. They weren't deported. They voted with their feet. Actually, they voted with U-Hauls, and every single U-Haul drove to a red state. So, Gavin, how are the people who are left doing? But how are the people who can't afford a truck doing? Newsom tried to interject with a measured defense of California's GDP and its role as a hub of innovation. His voice was the sound of a man trained to remain calm while the building burns, controlled, professional, rhythmic. He spoke of the state's role in the green transition, of the richness of its diversity, of the sheer scale of its production. Trump let him speak for exactly 15 seconds, just long enough to be polite, but not long enough to finish a thought or build a narrative. "You're doing the thing again," Trump said, cutting him off with a flick of his wrist. "The smooth-talking thing. Very polished, like a car salesman. A good one, I'll give you that. You could sell a car with no engine and make the customer feel lucky. But here's the problem with car salesmen. Gavin. Eventually, the customer has to drive the car. And 4 million customers drove yours right out of the state. The engine is dead, Gavin. The wheels are off. And you're still talking about the leather seats. The showmanship in Trump's voice suddenly dimmed, replaced by a lower, grittier register of genuine irritation. It was the tone of a man who had seen something he couldn't unsee. Let's talk about the homeless. This one really bothers me. When you were mayor of San Francisco in 2004, you said you would end homelessness. 21 years ago, you made a promise. And promises matter where I come from. In business, if you promise to finish a building in 21 years and it's still a hole in the ground, you don't get a promotion. You get a lawsuit. He pulled a figure from the folder. $24 billion. That's what California has spent on homelessness under Gavin. $24 billion. Do you know what you can build for $24 billion? I built Trump Tower for $250 million. For $24 billion, I could build 96 Trump Towers. I could house every homeless person in California in a luxury apartment with a doorman and room service and still have change left over. But Gavin has housing first. Sounds nice, right? It's a great slogan. Except 75% of the chronically homeless have drug addictions or severe mental illness. And Gavin's rules say you can't require sobriety or treatment. You give them a house and say, do whatever you want. That's not housing. That's just a very expensive room with no rules and no hope. It's a warehouse for the dying. Trump leaned forward, his eyes boring into Newsom's, the intensity in the room reaching a fever pitch. And what did you get for that $24 billion? 31% more homeless people. The rest of the country saw homelessness go down by 10%. Every other state figured it out. You spent $24 billion to make the problem a third worse. You have to try to fail that badly. It's almost impressive. It's a masterclass in bureaucratic incompetence. He cited an NBC investigation that had surveyed 153 blocks of downtown San Francisco, the very streets Newsom once walked as mayor. Trash on every single block, needles on 41, human waste on 96. 96 blocks. A preschool teacher said, and I'm quoting, "We see poop, we see pee, we see needles, and we see trash." That's the walking route for children going to school in Nancy Pelosi's district and Gavin's state. That is the reality of the California model. A child stepping over a needle on her way to learn how to read. That is your legacy. He paused, letting the imagery settle in the room. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the clicking of cameras and the distant hum of DC traffic. Then came the pivot. But here's my favorite part. 2023. President Xi Jinping, China, very tough guy, comes to San Francisco for a summit. And you know what happened? The streets got clean overnight. The tent cities? Gone. The needles? Gone. The waste on 96 blocks? Gone. The addicts? Relocated. San Francisco looked beautiful, like a postcard, sparkling for the president of China. It was a transformation, and it was a miracle. Trump let the silence stretch for 4 long seconds. The room held its breath. And then, Trump said, his voice dropping to a whisper, and then he left. And it all came back. Every tent, every needle, every pile of you-know-what, within a week. It was a magic trick, Gavin. But the trick was on the taxpayers. You proved something that night. You can fix the streets whenever you want. You have the power. You have the resources. You just don't want to do it for Americans. You did it for a communist dictator. You cleaned the streets for Xi Jinping and left them dirty for the people who elected you. Gavin, even I wouldn't do that, and I've been accused of a lot of things. I put America first. You put the guest list first. Newsom's smile was gone now. His face was a blank slate. Sees the expression of a man running complex internal calculations on whether to swing back or simply endure the beating. His eyes were flat, his jaw set. He was no longer the confident governor. He was a man trapped in a narrative he couldn't control. Trump wasn't finished. 33 billion, he said, stretching the word billion until it filled every corner of the room. In unemployment fraud, your Employment Development Department, the EDD, it sounds like a disease, and it is. They sent 33 billion in fraudulent payments during COVID. Prisoners got checks. Inmates. The state knows where they are. They're behind bars. Their location is literally tracked by the government. And the EDD still mailed them checks. Dead people got checks. People in other states who never worked a day in California got checks. So international crime rings filed thousands of claims, and nobody noticed for months. It was a buffet for criminals, and the taxpayers were the only ones who weren't invited. He added a detail that felt like a sharp jab to the ribs. A state audit found the EDD was paying monthly service fees for over 6,000 cell phones that nobody was using. Phones sitting in drawers for 4 years, and the state was paying the bill. That's not government. That's comedy. 7 of your state agencies are now classified as high risk for waste and fraud. $76 billion in high-risk operations. And then, the cherry on top, your chief of staff, Dana Williamson, gets indicted on 23 counts. Bank fraud, wire fraud. She claimed $1.7 million in fake expenses, a $15,000 Chanel bag, a private jet, a $170,000 birthday trip to Mexico. And she did it while sitting in the office next to yours. You didn't know your own chief of staff was buying Chanel bags with taxpayer money? I notice when someone changes the flowers in the lobby. I notice everything. That's why I'm behind this desk and you're in that chair. The president actually laughed then, a short, sharp burst of genuine amusement that was more cutting than any insult. And the train to nowhere. High-speed rail, L.A. to San Francisco. Approved in 2008 for $33 billion. Now it's $128 billion, 4 times the cost. And how many people have ridden it? 0. Not one. 15 years of construction, $128 billion, and 0 passengers. I built skyscrapers in 18 months. I built golf courses in a year. This guy can't build a train in 15 years, and he wants to run the country? The country is harder than a train, Gavin. Much harder. You can't just talk a country into existence. The barrage continued, the humor fading into a cold, clinical takedown. Houses. You promised 3.5 million new homes. You built 600,000. You missed by 82%. And when they asked you about it, you called it a stretch goal. In business, if you miss by 82%, you're fired. You're gone. You don't get a bonus. You get an escort out of the building. In California, you run for president. Schools? 2/3 of your kids can't do math at grade level. Half can't read. Your own state's test scores say this. It's not my opinion. It's your own data. But your kids? Private school. Oh, in person. While everyone else's kids got a laptop and 2 years of lost life. That follows a child forever, Gavin. That lost learning is a lifetime of lost opportunity. You did that. Not COVID. You. He turned to the final category, the one that hit closest to home for the millions of people who felt the state's decline in their daily lives. Crime. Up across the board. You can steal $949 from a store, and it's a misdemeanor. People walk in with garbage bags. take everything off the shelves, and walk out. They don't even run. They just walk. Stores are closing because of it. Walgreens, Target, small businesses, they can't survive. And when the voters passed Proposition 36 to reverse your policies, you opposed it. Your own people told you that you were wrong, and you told them they were wrong. That takes a special kind of, well, let's just call it confidence. Or maybe it's just arrogance. Trump set down the papers. He placed both hands back on the desk and looked at Newsom as if he were a business proposal he had already decided to reject. The show was over, and the judgment was final. Gavin wants to be president, Trump said to the room, his voice echoing with a finality that felt like a closing argument. The hair is running, the smile is running, the whole package is running. So here is what America gets: a man built by a billionaire's money and a political boss's appointments. A man who had an affair with his campaign manager's wife. A man who told 40 million people to hide while he went to a $350 dinner. A man whose kids were in class while yours were on Zoom. And a man who spent $24 billion to make homelessness worse. A man who lost 4 million residents and $33 billion in fraud. A man who lied about fire prevention by 700% while houses burned. A man who cleaned the streets for China, but wouldn't do it for you. He looked directly at Newsom, the distance between the two men feeling like a chasm that could never be bridged. That's the California model. Beautiful hair, beautiful suit, and the worst record of any governor in America. You look like a president, Gavin. But looking like a president and being one are two different things. I look like a billionaire because I am one. You look like a governor who has it all figured out. But 4 million people looked at your state and said, "I'm out." And they weren't wrong. The numbers don't lie, even if you do. Trump turned back to the cameras, his focus shifting as easily as a lens. 4 million people already voted with moving trucks. I think that tells you everything you need to know about the future Gavin Newsom wants for this country. He picked up a pen and began signing an executive order on trade, his attention shifting instantly to the work of the presidency. He was done with Newsom. The governor remained in the visitor's chair, hands on the armrests, his posture perfect, his face composed. He looked exactly the way he always did. But the gap between that polished exterior and the reality that had just been laid bare was visible to everyone in the room. He looked like a man in a tuxedo standing inside a building that had just been condemned. Elegant, impeccably dressed, and completely out of place in the ruins. "See, Governor, would you like to respond?" a reporter asked, the question sounding like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Newsom straightened his tie, the fabric snapping back into place, and reached for the smile again. "I appreciate the president's colorful commentary. The fact remains that California is the 5th largest economy in the world, and we continue to lead in innovation, climate." "There it is," Trump said, not even looking up from his signature, his voice filled with a weary amusement. 5th largest economy. I told you, he can't help it. It's like a tick. He's like a doll with a string. You pull it, and he says the same 5 things. The laughter in the room drowned out the rest of Newsom's sentence. It was a cruel, dismissive sound. He didn't start a new one. Another reporter asked about the $33 billion in fraud, the number hanging in the air like a heavy weight. Every state dealt with pandemic-era fraud, Newsom said, his voice smooth and articulate, the practiced rhythm of the bureaucrat returning. And California has been working aggressively to recover those funds, and $33 billion, Trump said, still signing, the pen scratching across the paper. Just say the number, Gavin. Say it out loud. It's therapeutic. Tell the folks at home how much of their money you lost to the prisoners." Newsom didn't say the number. He stuck to the talking points his team had prepared, but the room had shifted. The physics of the space had changed. The man behind the desk was in control. The man in the visitor's chair was a prop in someone else's play. He was a character whose lines had been written by his opponent. When Trump decided it was over, he stood up and shook Newsom's hand. The same firm grip, the same pull. "Thank you, Gavin. Say hello to California for me. The parts that are left. The parts that haven't moved to Texas yet." Newsom walked out with his team forming a protective perimeter, a phalanx of aides and advisors who looked as shell-shocked as the governor felt. He was still smiling. He shook hands with the Secret Service agent by the door, a final act of performed grace. He looked exactly like a man who had just had a productive meeting, which is what he always looked like, and that was the problem. And the smile had become the most damaging thing about him. It was evidence of a man who had spent his career pretending everything was fine, until the skill finally failed him in a room where the numbers mattered more than the lighting. The fallout was instantaneous. A 13-second clip of Trump saying, "4 million people already voted with moving trucks," went viral before Newsom's motorcade had even reached the airport. It didn't need context. It didn't need a narrator. It was a presidency summarized by an exodus. The Xi Jinping section followed, racking up 27 million views in 48 hours. It was shared not just by partisan critics, but by San Francisco residents who had seen the overnight cleanup and the subsequent return of the tents with their own eyes. They didn't share it because they loved Trump. They shared it because someone had finally articulated the absurdity of what they lived through, the realization that their suffering was optional and that their government was capable of excellence only when a foreign power was watching. The news cycles tried to analyze it, to find the angle that would make sense of the carnage. CNN called it characteristically undisciplined but unusually factual. An Obama strategist, speaking on the condition of anonymity, admitted the problem wasn't the format, but the numbers. "You can't spin your own state's audit report," he said. "Once those figures are out there, they become the reality." Gavin went in there looking for a debate and found himself at an inquest. MSNBC brought in economists who confirmed that the 4 million figure, the 33 billion in fraud, and the rail costs were all accurate. "The numbers are correct," the economist conceded, his face grim. "The characterization is another matter, but the data is undeniable." In Fresno, Rosa Martinez heard her name on the radio while driving to her new job as a grocery store cashier. She heard the words 22 years and Fresno, and she had to pull her car onto the shoulder of Highway 99. She sat there for 4 minutes, watching the dashboard clock change, stunned that someone in Washington finally knew her name, finally knew her story. She had been a statistic for 3 years. Now she was a symbol. That night, she told her daughter, and the resulting TikTok of her story reached millions, a digital campfire for the people California had left behind. On Interstate 10, a couple in a U-Haul heading for Scottsdale heard the broadcast on satellite radio. The truck was heavy with the remains of a life they had built in the valley, furniture, memories, and the crushing weight of a mortgage they could no longer sustain. When Trump mentioned the moving trucks, the woman put her hand on her husband's arm. He didn't look at her. He just kept his eyes on the road out of California. The same road 4 million others had taken, for 4 million different reasons that all added up to the same conclusion. The dream was over, and the nightmare was too expensive. In Oakland, a teacher named Diane Chen watched the clips on her lunch break. She looked at the bulletin board in the teacher's lounge, which was already covered in statistics about student failure and budget cuts. She didn't add anything new. She didn't join the conversation. She just finished her sandwich and went back to her classroom to teach 26 third graders, more than half of whom were years behind in math. She would teach them today, and she would teach them tomorrow, because that is what teachers do in states where governors dine at the French Laundry, while schools are locked tight. She saw the governor's smile on her screen and realized it was the only thing in California that was still working perfectly. That evening, Newsom's Instagram posted a photo of the handshake, looking every bit the statesman. The lighting was perfect, the angle was flattering, and the governor looked as though he were in the middle of a profound exchange of ideas. The caption talked about innovation and the fifth largest economy, the same lines that had been used for a decade. And the top comment, with nearly 90,000 likes, was just 5 words. "How's California doing, Gavin?" The next morning, Trump posted one last time, a final nail in the coffin of the governor's D.C. trip. Gavin Newsom came to the Oval Office today, and it did not go well for him or for California. I showed him the numbers, and he had no answers. None. Beautiful hair, though. Very shiny. Maybe he should do shampoo commercials instead of running for president. Would be a big improvement for California. He can sell the suds, because he certainly can't sell the results. After that day, the script had changed. Every time Gavin Newsom stood at a podium to speak about the California model, every time he adjusted his tie and smoothed his hair to deliver the line about the fifth largest economy, a ghost would haunt the room. In every comment section, in every text thread, and in the quiet thoughts of those driving east in a rented truck, the same question would echo, hanging in the air like a final judgment that no amount of polish could ever scrub away. "How's California doing, Gavin? Tell everybody." At the end of the day, a man can only survive on the strength of his own story for so long before the truth of the people he leads finally catches up to him.